Hey friends, it's me, Patrick God, and welcome to this Blazor server tutorial this time. This tutorial is complete, meaning we are implementing all the CRUD operations, create, read, update, and delete, but we are not using any HTTP methods like get, post, put, and delete. This is done in the Blazor WebAssembly CRUD tutorial. Check it out here, please. This time, everything is running on the server, and this is the crucial difference, right, between Blazor WebAssembly, that's the stuff I usually use on my channel, and Blazor server. So with Blazor WebAssembly, we've got the typical SPA, the single page application framework. We've got a client and a server. The client is all the HTML stuff, in our case, the Razor components, for instance, and also C# code. And on the server, we've got our web API with controllers. But with Blazor server, we are doing everything on the server, as the name implies. There are no HTTP calls. Instead, we've got a WebSocket, and well, it's not necessary for the client to download all the data. We cover the details then in the tutorial, so I think it's not necessary to do everything here in the introduction. What we're going to do is we built a tiny little video game database using Entity Framework Core InMemory. It's the first time I'm using this in such a tutorial. Pretty neat, I think, for tutorials like that, because it also says in the description that you want to use EF Core InMemory for testing purposes, or if you got an idea in your mind, then EF Core InMemory is pretty great. I think now already recorded this and tested it. So yeah, I think these are all the information you need. If you like this video and learned something, I would really appreciate it if you subscribe and click the like button. Don't forget to click the bell icon here so you get a notification when I upload a new video. Thank you so much for that. And additionally, I can recommend the newsletter, of course. If you are subscribed to that newsletter, you get these videos here earlier in your inbox. You get articles, more information, and also early access to my upcoming courses. And one of the big upcoming courses is the .NET 6 Web Developer Bootcamp, really big one, where I want to focus on the skills you need to get a job in the .NET web development world. So maybe this is something for you, and in this case, you might want to subscribe, and I promise I won't spam you. Just send an email once a week. Usually it's sometimes even less than once a week, but still, maybe that's interesting for you. And the last thing, as always, guys, thank you so much for all the coffee and tea. This time it's tea. I mean, why not? Thank you so much for all your support. Let me just take a sip. Still a little hot. Okay. And with that, you know the drill. I am able to make all these videos while my little boy is asleep. So thank you very much for all your support. And now I'm done with the introduction. Enjoy the tutorial. All right, Visual Studio 2022. Let's create a new project. And this time it's a Blazor server app, as you can already see right here. Not as usual Blazor WebAssembly, as you can see in lots of other videos on my channel. Blazor server this time, and if you don't find it here, you can just look for it, not Google. I wanted to say Google for it. No, not Google for it. You can just search here, enter Blazor, or maybe Blazor server, or only server, and then you get your Blazor server app template. So let's choose this one. Blazor server CRUD tutorial, maybe, or only CRUD. I think that's enough. Okay, that's nice. Blazor server CRUD. This is the name of our project. As you can see here, I've got .NET 6 installed, of course, and .NET 5 is also installed. And I'm thinking of already creating some .NET 7 tutorials. If you are interested in that, then please write a comment down in the comment section below this video. For that, you need Visual Studio 2022 preview, the preview edition. But the preview of .NET 7 is already out there, so maybe this is interesting for you. Please, if so, write it down in the comments. Thanks for that, by the way. Now, the first thing I already want to tell you here is you don't see the option to choose ASP.NET Core hosted, right? it's the same with the authentication types. It's the same with configure for HTTPS and also enable Docker, but you have not the option to host this or to check ASP.NET Core hosted as it is the case in the WebAssembly projects. Now, why is that? Well, everything is run on the server, and that's why. So what we can see in a minute or in a second is, here it is already. This was fast. Nice. Can be fast sometimes as well. That's really nice. Okay, so we have only one project, right? When we again compare this, sorry about the comparison. Maybe if you're not interested in the comparison, then I'm really sorry about that. But we do lots of Blazor WebAssembly tutorials and projects here on this channel, so I think it makes sense to compare this a little bit. And as you can see here now, we only got one project in our solution, and in the WebAssembly projects, let me pull one up real quick. Got here preparation of maybe the next Blazor tutorial, EditForm. As you can see here, we've got 3 projects, right? We've got the client project, the server project, and the shared project for the models maybe, then the server project, which is a web API, and also the client project then for all the pages, the shared components, all the Blazor stuff in essence. Now, when we do Blazor server, when we use Blazor server, everything is running on the server, meaning we do not really have actual web service calls. Meaning you won't see, and we will open the console in a minute, where you can see this on Chrome. In Chrome, we see. Let's open the console with F12, and now we open the network tab. And there it is. Right, and now let's fetch the data. See, nothing is going on here. Now, why is that? Thing is that, again, let's go to the counter page and then fetch data. You don't see any kind of web service call. Now, the thing is, and bear with me that now I don't find it directly. Somewhere there's the actual web socket that is opened. Here it is, I think. Yeah, that's the one. I think, yeah, here you see the messages, right? And when we go to the counter page and then back to the fetch data page, something is happening here, and I'm not that familiar with that, so bear with me, please. But the important message here is that we don't use typical web service calls, no REST calls in essence. What we have here is we open a WebSocket tunnel, if you like, and with that WebSocket then all our components are updated. So this is not really downloaded. The whole page, the whole application is not downloaded to the client of the user. Everything is going onto the server or on the server, and we just get all these messages here and then, well, just render them on the client, but we do not really get the data, download the actual data here, for instance, of the weather forecast. So this is in essence the big difference between Blazor WebAssembly and Blazor Server. So not the typical single page application or SPA framework, if you like. It is a bit different here. Still, let's do this real quick. And you see here now, well, we already saw the application. And now when you see when you have a look at the files and all the data here, you see that we've got a pages folder and a shared folder, similar to, again, let me pull this one up here, Blazor WebAssembly, the pages folder and the shared folder of the client project. But now we also have a data folder here. And this is, well, the way Microsoft did it now with this template to, in essence, put the model here, the weather forecast model, and also a service, right? And as you can see here, there's no HTTP GET or anything, as you would see here in the weather forecast controller. This is a real controller with HTTP GET and so on. Not necessary at all here with Blazor Server. All right, so with that out of the way, what I want to do here in this example application, still want to build all that Blazor stuff and all the, well, grabbing data, all the CRUD operations with the database, but this time, let me save you some time. I don't want to use the SQL Server. not SQLite, I just want to use EF Core in memory. Maybe this is also something new to you. It was for me actually to just use EF Core in memory for testing purposes, and I think this is a great way to show you this, and a great way to use EF Core in memory. So this is the first thing we have to do, and to be able to do that, we stop the application first. Here's the terminal, so close this one, and then we need only one single NuGet package, and make sure to choose the Browse tab, and then EF Core, not EF Core, but oh, there it was, yeah, in memory. You can just search for in memory, and this is the one, in memory database provider for Entity Framework Core, to be used for testing purposes. Although they say in their docs that you shouldn't use this for unit tests, but for things like this tutorial maybe, and if you just want to build a quick app, an MVP, a minimum viable product, maybe this would be still, it would need more, I guess, but for testing purposes where you just want to test some features, test an idea, maybe even write a prototype, then this is a great idea. And what's that? Hot chocolate subscriptions. I like this icon here. Hot chocolate. Why not? Contains an in-memory implementation. Okay. GraphQL. Okay. Maybe that's also something for another tutorial. All right. In memory it is. We install this thing, and then we are able to get and read and update some data, I hope. Pretty new for me, this stuff. But still, let's see how this goes. Okay, hope you're done. Now, the next thing we have to do is we go to the program CS and register this new database. But first, no, that's not the first thing we need. First, we need a data context still. It is just for testing purposes, but we need a new class, and this is then our data context. So similar to the entity framework implementations with the SQL Server, maybe this inherits from Microsoft Entity Framework Core. And now what we need is a constructor first. So CTOR, hit tab twice. This is our data context, our parameter. No, not parameter, at least we need a parameter. Context options. Data context, we call this options. We use the base constructor here, options, and let's already add a model. This time I don't want to use a superhero, I want to use the VideoGames. It's a simple example, no relationships or anything, because it's really about Blazor Server here. You can have a look at all my other videos regarding relationships, Entity Framework Core with SQL Server, and so on. So please check out my channel, maybe subscribe even, that would be really nice. Thank you very much for that. Or maybe I managed to add some info cards here, so maybe just click the info cards. Okay, so let's add game. This is our model here. And now this thing gets an ID. It also gets a name, which is string empty at first. What I also want to add is the developer of the game. Also string empty. All right. And last thing, the release date. So a date time, call this release, and this can also be null. Okay, so this is that. This is our model now. And again, in the data context, we add this now as a data set, as a DB set. So DB set game, and we call this games. And we can already, because we've got this warning here, see that? Let me show you. Non-nullable property games must contain a non-null value when exiting constructor. Consider declaring the property as nullable. Don't want to do that. We can actually just initialize this as a set of a game and then this also should work. And the last thing here is I already want to seed some data, and I have to pull up my other project here because I already did this. And don't worry, I'm not copy pasting. I just need a look. So overrides on model creating, that's the one. And to seed some data, doesn't matter if you use the in-memory data, in-memory EF Core package or SQLite, SQL Server. I guess it's always the same entity. So for the entity game, what we want to do is we tell our context, our database, that it already gets some data. So we add a new game, and the ID of this game is almost the ID curly braces. That was the problem here. So ID is 1, the name. Please feel free to enter another game here if you're into video games. Hope you haven't stopped the video already. So Half-Life 2 is a pretty nice game. Really like that. And the release date was, new date time, 2004, November 16th. And now I'm copy pasting. It's called release. All right. Okay. ID 2, and let me add day of the tentacle. If you're enrolled in my e-commerce course, you know that I love day of the tentacle. If not, maybe you want to enroll, and then you know why. Okay, and this was really, oh, that's not true. It was 1993. 1993. May 25th. Okay, and something is wrong here. Now it should be correct. Okay, so we've got 2 games in the beginning. All right. Hope that's correct. And then now comes the registration here. So what we have to do is, let me just save this first, and then builder services, add DbContext, and then our DataCotext. And this thing gets an option, which is option use in memory database. And as you can see now with control period, I open the quick fix menu, and we need the using directive for entity framework core here. And the only thing we need is not a connection string or anything. We just give this thing a name. So for instance, the video game DB for video game database, and that's it. So this is now our, well, our in-memory database that we can use for all our data. So the next thing I want to do then is add another service. So similar to the weather forecast service here, we can just create another one. So add class, and we call this one then the GameService. All right. And now, since we want to access the data context, it's again pretty similar to the services or the controllers we use in an ASP.NET Core hosted Blazor WebAssembly project. So first, again, the constructor where we inject our data context. So data context. We create and assign the field context, and I have to configure Visual Studio again, so I don't have to add this underscore manually. And with that, we've got our context. And now there's one little thing we have to do when we use the in-memory database and we use, or we want to use seeded data with the on-model creating method here. Where was it? There it is. this thing here, on model creating, right? With on model creating and model builder entity has data, we can, well, give this model this table in essence. This is the table then, our games table. Already data when we start this thing. Now, when we use SQL Server, for instance, and run a code first migration, then everything is okay with that, and we've got our data stored persistently in the database. But if you want to use an in-memory database, we have to call this every single time we start this thing. And, well, I think an okay-ish place to do that is here, the constructor of the service for this tutorial. Again, this is only for testing purposes, and there it is already. Context database ensure created. When this thing is run or executed, ensures that the database for the context exists, meaning after this method is executed, we've got our seed data. And we test this already with our get method. Well, it's not really a get method in the case of an HTTP call. So let's maybe just call this not get, or we can call this load, for instance. So public async task, and well, now it's called get. That's nice. A list, it's a list of games, and let's call this now load games, no argument here, and we return in essence. Do we return this? No, let's change that. Maybe we can just have the games present here. You see, I still have to change my kind of thinking here, because this game service will be used in the Blazor components already. So it's not the controller. A typical way to do this is I write the controller and the web API service, inject the service into the controller, and then on the client side I create another service that is then doing all these web service calls. But this time this service is already the service that, well, kind of combines the server stuff and the client stuff. So we can already have our list of games here as well, right? So for instance, we can just say we've got this property here, which is a list of games. Model is called game, of course, and these are our games, and this is then a new list of video games. And here then only returns a task, and what we do is we say, or let's say our result is, no, let's just say games is then await context games, and then to list async. Okay, and we add entity framework core again, and with that we've got our games and our get/load method. Now another thing I want to do is, since we also want to inject this service in the Blazor components, we add an interface. So let's add an interface here real quick. New item, interface, and this is then our game service. And here then we also got our list of games, which should not be the method. First, just the games as a property. Okay, like that. And now our method task get no load games. Okay, so that should be it, and we enter or add the semicolon here, and with that we've got our games and the load games method. That's nice. And here this thing now implements this interface. Okay, everything is already implemented. So again, maybe a different way. First I would, or you would maybe create the interface and then the actual service here. And then what you also have to do is, of course, register this thing. So builder services, add scoped, game service, and we want to use the game service implementation class for that. All right, this should work now. And this is the, well, let's say the data part, the server part, and now the other part, which is also done on the server, is the actual page. So let's create a new page here. Add Razor component. Call this then video games maybe. This is a page. So we add the page directive with the route. Call this video games. That's nice. And now what I want to do is just create a table here. So let's just add typical table with the class table. The class then is Bootstrap in this case, or it comes from Bootstrap, is provided by Bootstrap. Now for the header, we've got the name of the game. We've got the developer. Let's call this game maybe. And we also got the release date. Okay. And now for the body, we will use a for each to display the list of all our games. But before we can do that, we inject our game service. So GameService, and let's add this real quick in our imports. For that we need the data namespace, and then yep, now the page knows the iGameService interface. Okay, that's nice. And here now we say for each game in our GameService games, we add a new row and then say this is our game name and our game developer, and then our game release date. But let's use too short date string here, then it looks a bit better, I guess. What's the problem here? Okay, no problem here anymore. All right, so this should be our data then. And regarding updating and creating a new one, we do that later. Only thing we have to do, of course, is we have to load the games, in essence, from the DataCotext, from the database, the in-memory database. And for that, again, we use, well, not again, because of all the other tutorials, but here we use the onInitialized async method, lifecycle method of Blazor. So we can just enter override and then onInitialized async. Let's get some room here. And now we call await game service, oh Jesus, await game service, and then load games. And add the async keyword. Okay, already did a lot. I hope this works. Let's see. We start the app. There it is. And I forgot one thing, the nav menu. Let's add another entry to the nav menu here. Let's just copy this, paste it down here. Like that. The route is now video games. Video games, and I don't know if there's an icon for that. Let me have a look really quick. Not really. Well, we've got puzzle games, so maybe puzzle piece should work. That's the one. Okay, let's save that again. And there it is already. Hot reload at its best. We go here and it says, sorry, there's nothing at this address. Nice. Why not? Let's have a look again. Video games. Jesus. Nice. Oh yeah, writing code and talking at the same time. Sometimes not that easy. Video games, there it is. This is what I wanted. So we've got our table, and as you can see, again, no call whatsoever. We've got our WebSocket messages here. And I was thinking that we can see this a little bit, but no, not really. Binary, just binary messages. Nope, no idea what's going on here. If you know more, please write it down, and maybe you can tell us, well, all of us, where we can see what is actually going on here. Okay, and this is already reading all the video games, right? That's nice, I guess. Now let's get a single one. So back to Visual Studio, and first the service or the interface of the service. Maybe we can now use the get, create, and so on names. So the first method we need is get game, or let's call this get single game with the ID of the game. Another one already, let's just write them down so we have them, is create game with the actual model here. Of course, we could or should use maybe in a real environment, we should use DTOs for that, data transfer objects. But for this little test here, let's keep it simple. So update game, maybe also with the ID here, and then delete a game only with the ID, like that. Okay, and now here we implement this. Great, and with that now we rebuild everything. Let's implement the get single game method here. Our game is await context games, and then find async ID. Now if our game is null, we just throw a new exception. No game here. Otherwise we return our game. And I think I did something wrong here. Yes, I did. I forgot the game for the return type. And let's add this here real quick. And this should work then. And you know what? Since we're still already at it, let's just write all the other service methods and then focus on Blazor. So we've got our get method. Let's implement now the update with var DbGame first, because this is the game from the database. Await. That actually was already. Yep, that's nice. But no, that's actually exactly what we need. And now if the DbGame is null, again, let's just copy this. Okay, but otherwise we say our DbGame name is the game name, then we've got not the ID, the developer, game developer, and the date, release date is game release, and then we say await context save changes async. And then, well, what we can do is actually navigating back to the list of heroes, because the idea is when we have a quick look at our application, we see the list here, but what we will add is an edit button back here at the end of every row, and also a new button, create button, at the bottom maybe. And with that then we navigate to another page with a form where we then create or update the hero, not the hero, the game. And when this is done, we can actually navigate back to this list and see the complete result, right? So let's maybe do it here. It's debatable if you should put this here actually, because this is, well, it's the service and it's not really the UI stuff you're doing here. So we could also use the navigation manager of Blazor here on the page then, or you can do it here. Well, since I'm already here, let's just do it here as well. For that, first we need the navigation manager. So navigation manager, let's call this navigation manager. We have to add, yeah, you see, the field's not that right because it comes from components and we're here in a service. So maybe you should do it differently. Tell me what you think, please, in the comments below. Is it okay to use navigation stuff here in the service? I think I saw one comment. Can't remember who wrote this, but I think it's a good point that you shouldn't really do this in the service. You should do this on the page, maybe on the page logic. But still, navigation manager, navigate to, and the page then was video games, not page, it's video games. Okay, so this should be the update game method. Now let's continue with creating a game. So we've got, in essence, just context, games, add game. That's it. And then await, context, save changes async. And again, navigation manager, navigate to video games. And the last one, the delete method, is var. Okay, I'm copy and pasting now. All right, so we try to find the game, and this is an asynchronous method. If it's null, we throw an exception. And if not, we say context games remove DbGame, and then await. Let me copy this as well. Okay, so we save changes asynchronously again, and then we say navigate to video games. And this is all our service has to do. So we've got the load games method, get a single game where we just return this single game. We've got our create method where we just add the game, save the changes, navigate back. Again, this is debatable, of course. And then also updating, where we update every property manually. Of course, you could use AutoMapper, for instance, to, well, make this a bit prettier. And then also the delete game method. All right. Okay, and now to see all that in action, we add another page for the single hero, and then we will also add an EditForm there. So a new eraser component. We call this now video game. And if you're wondering why I call this video game and not game, or why I didn't call the model video game, it's exactly because of this page here. I did this before in the other solution you saw a couple of minutes ago with Blazor. Blazor coming up soon again. And there I called the page video game and the model video game, and then the namespaces are mixed and you have to really specify the namespace or the model you want to use. Not that fun. Yeah, and that's in essence the reason why. Okay, so here our page. First thing, page directives. Now please the correct paths, not hero. It's game. I'm really used to well, writing that stuff with superheroes, but this time now it's about games, and I want to call this a video game here, and this one is video game with the page parameter, which is the ID. Now, why do I add 2 here? The difference is when I have no ID, we use this page and the edit form to create a new video game. And with an ID, well, in that case, we get or load a single video game from the database, and then we are able to update it or delete it. All right, so this is everything in essence. And well, last thing, the game service. So iGameService. Okay, and now I want to check if the ID is null or not, and in that case, well, we display something else. But first, what we need is we need the parameter down here in the code block. So let's add this property here. It's an ID, and don't forget to add the parameter attribute. And now we can say if ID is null, we display something, and else we do that as well. But first here we say h3 for the title, create a new video game, and here then it is h3 edit, and then we need the game because I want to display the game name here, so this should look like that then. And let's add the game real quick. Down here we say game is a new video game. Okay, now this should work. Great. Okay, and I see this line here, and this is absolutely true. This is not nullable. So let's add the question mark here, and then this little warning here should go away. All right. Okay, so these are in essence already our titles. Shall we test this? Well, maybe we can test this already. First, the onInitialized, of course, otherwise we would not get a game. So again, override onInitialized async. Wait, we're using the parameter here, so we need the onParameter set actually. So onParameters set, that's the correct method. Async. And here then we say game, and then await game service get single game with the given ID, which can be null, so we have to parse this to an integer. If the ID is not null. All right. Okay. All right, let's save this and test this real quick. So in essence, we should see a difference here in the titles. Let's open it. Oh, okay. We totally forgot the edit button and the create button. So we cannot, well, we can test this actually. So let's say video game 1 should be Half-Life 2. There it is. This is Day of the Tentacle. What about 3? Whoops, no game here. That's correct. And no ID, create a new video game. All right, so maybe we should add the edit buttons. Let's do that real quick. So back to Visual Studio and the video games page. Now we have another column, and here as well. And here we just add a button with the class btn and then btn primary, and on click we call a method, but we need a parameter, so we need this crazy lambda expression here. Let's call this show game with the game ID. I know we need the method. And another thing first is we add a little icon. So maybe a pencil icon. And this should be the button then. And also we need a create button for new games. So button class is button primary. So we get the proper size and the proper color. Again, this is provided by Bootstrap. And on click, another method, create new game. And let's give this just this label here, create new game. And now let's also implement these methods. So show game and ID navigates, and I think I forgot the navigation manager, of course. So inject navigation manager, and now navigation manager navigate to, and then this should be video game with the given ID, and create new game. Again, the navigation manager navigate to, and then here simply video game. And you see now why I'm struggling with the navigate to function in the service, right? You would actually do that here in the UI stuff, and maybe here now in the video game page or component, when we have the edit or the create methods, then we could use, of course, the navigation manager here as well. So yeah, up to you how you want to use this. But now let's test this really quick. There it is. Button is wrong. Pencil, it should be called pencil. There it is. Nice. Okay, so we can create a new game, create a new video game. Nice. And we can edit Half-Life 2 and Day of the Tentacle. Maybe we can add some quotation marks here. Yeah, that's better. Nice. Okay, so this is done, and now really the rest of the CRUD operation. So we can read games, and now let's create a new one, update one, and also delete it. And for that, we need an edit form. So this is a bit more code we have to write here. We start with the edit form, and this edit form, as always, needs a model, and this is our game. And on submit, again, bear with me, I'm not implementing validation here. Got other tutorials for that. Or if you want to see it, actually want to do that with Blazor. So I know that some of you want to see a Blazor tutorial with fluent validation, but maybe it's also okay to first start with the simple Blazor form and also an edit form with Blazor components, because this is also another way of doing it. And I think that most people would use exactly that way, meaning a Blazor edit form with Blazor components for the input text field, the buttons, and so on, because they look a bit nicer, maybe. All right. Again, please write it down in the comments. We really love that. Thanks a lot for all your feedback, guys. Really, really means a lot to me. Okay, so we add a label here for, what do we have? The name. And then, and by the way, with Blazor, then you really don't have to do all that stuff, div and label and so on. Blazor already got all the CSS stuff covered for you. So in essence, when you learned Blazor, still learning it, it's still new for me, but I think when you know the components of Blazor, then in the long run, it is easier and faster to write these forms, because, well, they give you so many styling options and so on. That's pretty nice. So yeah, I really should create this tutorial about Blazor edit forms, I guess. Okay, long story short, we've got the label, now the input text for the name, and we no, we don't give this an actual name. We only need to bind something. So bind value would then be the game name, and another class form control. Okay, I think that's it. Now we copy this add it here for the developer. Developer ID, again, developer. This is the developer. All right. And then we've got our date time picker. This would then be input date. First, the names here. So release. Also here, release, form control. And I think that's it. Okay. After that, we need buttons after the div. So in a new line, we need a button to, well, update this thing or create it or to delete it. So first, very important, if you don't know this, we need a button of type submit, because with this button, then the handle submit method will be called, and we write that method in a minute. And now here we say class btn and then button primary, and after that we will change the text depending on if it is an edit or an update or actually creating a new game. And another button I want to see is the delete button. This, again, very important. We need the type button in this case, because otherwise it would also submit the form and then call the handle submit method. This thing now is red with button danger, and we call this delete game, and we call a method on click. So on click, we call delete game. Okay, and now some code. First, on initialization, now let's change the button text. But first, of course, we need it here. So string button text is string empty at first, and then override on initialized async. Well, don't really need the async one. Let's just remove this, not a task, it's void then. On initialized, we say the button text is, if the ID is null, then we say save new game, and otherwise update game. Okay, and then we need async task, the handle submit method. So now if the ID is null, then we say await GameService create game with that game, and otherwise we say Visual Studio is jumping around, don't know why. Await GameService update game with the game and the ID. And the last thing, first we parse this, and now our delete method, async task delete hero. See that? It's jumping around. I don't know. Await GameService and then delete game with the game ID. Okay, got an error here. Somewhere, delete game hero. Nice. Okay, this now should be gone. Okay. All right, these are all our implementations. We've got the EditForm, got the submit button. Maybe we should display this only if the ID is not null. And then we've got our code block with the parameter button text game, the uninitialized, where we change the button text, on parameter set, where we change, where we get the single game, handle submit for creating and updating, and the removing, deletion, whatever for the game. So I would say we test this now. And we have to run this again? No, we don't. There it is. Okay. Let's create a new one. And this should be The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Great game by Nintendo, of course. And the release date is actually way back 1998, November the 21st. Let's save this. This was fast. And again, no call, nothing, right? So we just see this game is now stored in the database. That's great. Now let's do something that will never happen. Half-Life 3, we update the game. Done, great. And now maybe we could add some CSS here, but let's delete this one. Also works. Great. And we refresh. It works, but I think this is part of the, well, that's just how the InMemory database works. When I now start this again, there it is. See that? Changes are gone. Okay. So this is everything, I hope, and I will commit this to, or push this to GitHub, so you got all the code, and now we also got a Blazor server CRUD application. All right, that's it. There you have it. Now you know how to implement all the CRUD operations on the server with Blazor server and not only with Blazor WebAssembly. You see the difference, right? You've got only one project in your solution and it's not a controller or anything you need to just use a typical service for that. In essence, it's just a class with an interface where you then get all your data from. Of course, you inject it on or in the page or the shared component, whatever you use, and then get your data from there. But still in the service, then we are injecting the data context from Entity Framework. So that's why it was a good idea, I think, to use Entity Framework core in memory, because then you see how this could work when you're using a real database like SQL Server, SQLite, and so on. So I hope you liked it and you learned something, and if so, again, please give me a thumbs up. Really means a lot to me. Maybe you want to subscribe to my channel, and don't forget the bell icon to get a notification for new videos. Also, don't forget the newsletter. Maybe this is something for you. I promise won't spam you, but you will get early access to the .NET 6 Web Developer Bootcamp, and also these videos here earlier in your inbox, and more fun stuff regarding .NET's development. And last not least, still got my tea this time. Thank you so much for all your coffee and tea, whatever it is. Maybe orange juice. Summer is coming, so maybe it's time for orange juice. I don't know. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope I see you next time. Take care.